that the body, and this will become more clear as we move into the urinary system and whatever as well, the body doesn't have a lot of mechanisms that allow us to deal with high blood pressure. And that is why high blood pressure is a health problem, is because our body doesn't know what to do with it. All of our mechanisms that we have in place are mechanisms that help raise blood pressure. Because that's the critical thing, right? If I don't have enough blood pressure to my brain, something's not going to work right. So we have all kinds of mechanisms to restore blood pressure once it has dropped. Right now I'm just going to tell you about the nervous system response because it's quick. But there's also a hormonal response to a drop in blood pressure that's something called the renin-angiotensin pathway. And it's also something that's very important in maintaining proper urinary output. So we'll cover it in more detail when we get to that chapter. That's where your textbook chooses to cover it. But there is hormonal control of blood pressure as well. But right now we're just focusing on the neural control. So this baroreceptor reflex not only works in response to high blood pressure, it also works in response to low blood pressure. It's just opposite though, right? If it senses that blood pressure is low, there's less stretch, right? If there's less stretch, there's less action potential going to the CNS. The medulla says, oh, I guess because action potentials are so slow now, blood pressure must be really low. Let's send out a signal to smooth muscle, sympathetic, right? Cause vasoconstriction, and then raise the blood pressure up. Do you think that happens fast or slow? What would you guess is faster? This was an electrical communication here or a hormonal endocrine response?
Electrical.
Faster, right? So this baroreceptor reflex is very quick. And in fact, you use it for just positional changes in blood, or changes in blood pressure due to changes in position, body position. Did you ever notice in the morning you're lying down and then you jump up real quick and you get a little lightheaded? Yeah. And that's because what has happened is that when you're lying down, gravity is not as much of a concern. So you don't need to have all this vasoconstriction to raise your blood pressure, get blood up to your brain. Blood vessels dilate a little bit. So if you're lying flat, we're going to do this in lab. If you're lying down, your blood vessels will dilate because the resistance is less to maintain blood pressure, adequate blood pressure. So now you're lying down and your vessels are dilated. Then you jump up. And now as soon as I jump up, what does the blood do? Due to gravity, it falls out of my head. And I'm a little dizzy. How long does it take you to recover? A couple seconds. And you're forgiven. In fact, in the period of about 3 heartbeats is all it takes for your cardiovascular system to restore blood flow back to your brain. That type of drop in blood pressure is called orthostatic, which just means position, body position. Orthostatic hypo, right, tension. So orthostatic hypotension is a drop in blood pressure due to standing up from lying down. Tell me what should happen to, should I fire a sympathetic response or a parasympathetic response into that?
Sympathetic.
Sympathetic. So what's going to happen to my blood vessel diameter with a sympathetic? So let's put this back up here. Is it up here? Oh yeah, here. In response, so blood pressure drops, right? So this is the body's response. This is a baroreceptor reflex to orthostatic hypotension. Last question on your quiz. When blood pressure drops, right, we know that we need to restore it very quickly. Because if you don't restore blood pressure to the brain, it's going to become anoxic. That is less oxygen and nutrients to the brain, and you're not going to function as well. So you said that we give a really quick sympathetic response. So what happens to stroke volume during a sympathetic response? Is preload affected? No, because that has to start with an increase in venous return. We didn't do anything with that. Is contractility affected? Does the sympathetic response give you more epinephrine in the body? Yes. Yeah. So more epinephrine, more contractility. So it's a positive inotropic agent, greater force of contraction. ESV goes down. Stroke volume goes Cardiac output, up. Blood pressure, up. Now, we started telling a response here. We're going to see, and the body's got multiple ways to get the same response. And that's logical, right? You wouldn't want to rely on only one thing. Everything else that we do ought to give us the same response, right? If you start walking yourself down a pathway and you see yourself doing something that's counterintuitive, you've probably made a mistake, assuming homeostasis. That happens sometimes. We call that shock. When the body does something that it's not supposed to do, that's due to shock. Okay? But under normal conditions, we've established that we need to raise the blood pressure. So every story I tell better end up with an up arrow on the blood pressure. All right. Does sympathetic response affect your heart rate? Yes, it does. If you have norepinephrine on IF channels of autorhythmic cells, does it increase the permeability or decrease the permeability? Increase the permeability, pacemaker potentials are faster, the heart rate goes up. If the heart rate goes up, cardiac output goes up. If cardiac output goes up, blood pressure